For the visuals here, you're going to be seeing me taking my own advice in real time, the same advice I'm going to give you guys in this video, where I follow other digital painting artists online and seeing things that I like about their stuff and applying it to my current level when it comes to digital painting within Photoshop. So you're going to be seeing me do that in real time, and you see what I used to be able to do and what I can do after applying myself using the same advice I'm going to be giving you guys here and more. To do this digital painting, I took tips and tricks from artists like WLOP or WLOP, Ilya Kushinov, Sakimi-chan, Shilin, and the list goes on. But your takeaway from this video will be all the things that I feel are necessary for you to do to improve on your art skills, to improve on your art level, to make sure that you are continuing to grow as an artist. So stick around as I go over 10 of these tips that work for me. Now the first tip is to experiment with references. Don't be afraid to use reference. Sometimes people look at using references as a bad thing, but it's actually good for learning. So if you're using it to learn, it's great. Google Images, Behance, Pinterest, Instagram, DeviantArt, these are all great places to go find reference to draw whatever it is you want to learn to draw. In fact, some of these sites have tutorial sheets created by other artists and other creators that teach you how to draw specific things, whether it be anatomy, digital painting in some cases, how to digitally paint specific things, or how to traditionally paint specific things. Sometimes you're not going online to find reference, you're getting reference from life, or you're getting reference from magazines, comic books, things like that. When I was younger, I drew things that I saw a lot, whether it be Nintendo Street Fighter video game cartridge where I see all the characters on it and it looked really cool and I had nothing to do, so I draw Ryu, Ken, and all those characters all over again. And obviously I can't trace that because it's on the cartridge, but there are cases where maybe I can trace, and again I say trace in the sense of you're tracing, trying to learn how to keep your hand steady, and sometimes tracing also helps put you in the mindset of the creator, the original creator, and maybe you start to figure out what the creator drew first, step by step, and it just helps put you in that mindset. And I think some of that leaks into your original style of drawing, or leaks into whatever style of drawing you end up developing. Now, I didn't trace a lot, but I'm pretty sure it's going to help. It will help keep your hand steady and all the things that I just said, right? The one thing you need to keep in mind is you're not tracing to have that be your thing, to trace, and all your works are just traced. The goal is to learn how to do this kind of stuff on your own. So you're tracing to learn, you're tracing to study, not tracing to own. And in some cases, you don't have to trace at all. Like I said, you can just train your eyes as well. So you don't want to stick to just tracing. You want to then graduate from that and then go into training your eye to where you're just drawing and you're looking. You're only using your eye. In some cases, maybe you're not even using a digital image. You're drawing from life directly. And I think a combination of all of these, and as long as you're pushing yourself to want to learn and train yourself, you will get better at it. I remember drawing a whole Spider-Man page from a comic book, but drawing it on like regular paper with like ballpoint pen, just trying to recreate that as best as I could with whatever tools that I had at my disposal. A good thing is to like draw that and draw it over and over again, because you draw it the first time, then you want to train your eyes to spot the differences, figure out what's wrong, train yourself to be able to copy, train yourself to be able to understand how that other artist did what he did, train yourself to be able to keep your hand steady and, come up with some technique and develop your own approach to drawing. If you see errors, fix them, or the next time you draw the same thing, you want to make sure that you're improving with each iteration. You can apply this technique to where you want to learn how to draw specific things, so you find a lot of reference of that specific things. Maybe it will be hands at a certain gesture, or certain types of buildings and architecture. If you draw it over and over again, the more you draw, the less reference you would need with time, because you're getting used to it and your brain's getting used to it, your muscle memory's getting used to it. The more reference you use, the less reference you need. So when you train yourself and you practice on one thing and you feel like you've learned it to the degree at which you feel comfortable moving on, and you will also keep on growing over time. That's another thing. You want to make sure that your goal is to keep on improving. Once you master one thing, move on. Don't stick with something that's easy. Don't keep drawing easy stuff. The last couple notes, tracing is not taboo. Neither does it guarantee gold. Like, you tracing doesn't guarantee that it's going to be good. So even tracing itself, it's not easy. But practice a lot, use reference, experiment with the reference. So sometimes you might draw something you see, sometimes I see like characters. I drew Superman a lot, like Superman from the original cartoons, and like it had like this really cool style, and I drew it enough to where I didn't need reference to be able to draw it. But sometimes you might want to experiment and say you know how to draw that, so okay, what if Superman had long blonde hair? Draw that instead. So you're drawing from reference, but you're making tweaks here and there and drawing other things and mixing and matching. That also helps you develop your own thing. Reference learning, studying can also include you studying art books and you just training your eyes to become very observant. Where you see something in real life, you can look at it and go, you know what, I don't know how to draw that, or that looks really cool and I want to learn how to draw that. Or it is in a certain pose, or you see a pose somewhere on your Instagram scrolling and somebody colors something a certain way, or there's just somebody in a certain pose that's just interesting to you. Learn how to draw it, study it, and find a way to have that improve you as a creator, because one way to want to improve as an artist is to want to improve as an artist, to truly be determined. Iteration, adding twists, practice, experiment, use references as much as you can, especially in this digital age. The resources are limitless. 2, plan ahead. Work step by step. So when I draw, I try to make sure I draw in steps. If I'm drawing a building, I make sure I start with just the shape. I'm not talking about like the details or anything like that. I don't care about the details for now. I'm just drawing the shape. Now if the building is just a regular square-ish shaped, building, like a box or like a cube type building, I try to start with that as the shape. If it's a combination of a cube and a cone, or a cube and some kind of triangle at the top, how the roof is going to be shaped, I'm just mixing and matching shapes, simple shapes, and then I go in with details as we go further into the illustration. If I'm drawing a character, I start off with figuring out what the pose is, have a good idea of what I want the pose to be, as maybe a simple thumbnail. Thumbnails also help. You draw a thumbnail before you do the original thing, so the thumbnail is kind of like a blueprint of what you're going to do, and you can like experiment with the thumbnail and do all your critical thinking during that stage, so that when you're actually working on the illustration, you know exactly what you want to do. So with whatever it be a pose, whether it be a background illustration, buildings, a whole cityscape, a forest, tree, you got to figure out, wait, is there going to be a lake, is there going to be a statue here, is there going to be like buildings that are more intricate than others, is this part of the cityscape going to be more corporate and capitalist than this other part that maybe is going to be a little more suburb. Like, you figure out what you want to do, have a plan before you try to execute. Comics do this as well. It's called storyboards or names. Well, comics and animation, storyboards, names. With comics, you have like people storyboarding the actual pages, so they know how many pages the chapter is going to be, or the book, the graphic novel is going to be, before they even start putting pen to paper at all, pencil to paper, whatever it is. They have all the pages planned out, and they know how every panel is going to look. They know what every character is going to say, when they're going to say it, and what panel they say it, how the panel is going to be shaped. Plan ahead. The tools you're going to use, what tools are you going to use to execute this? Plan ahead. So if I'm drawing a character, I already know what the pose is. If I had a thumbnail phase, I already figured out what that pose is going to be. If you're having trouble learning the pose itself and how to draw that goes back to the first step with experimenting with references and learning those things, learning the basic, knowing the rules before you can break them, especially if you're drawing from life. You have to know that kind of world before you can stylize what you're seeing in time. But for the first part, it's always great to learn with real life reference, but you can branch out in all sorts of things. I'll be honest, for me, I actually started with like stylized reference before I went into real life reference, but I still went into real life drawing real life things, because that also played into my development. This part is already assuming that you already have some skills from with anatomy or whatever. So in this case where I'm drawing a character, I already have a base understanding of how I want to construct that body. I already have an idea of the pose. I've planned everything out, the tools I'm going to use, all that, the paper I'm going to use, all of that. And then when I'm constructing that body, I've already drawn enough during that reference stage and just that practicing stage. I kind of know what I'm doing already. But when I sketch the pose, right? Before I even think of adding any details as to what the character is wearing, what type of hair they have, all that stuff. Even if I already know that, again, as part of the planning, I'm already focusing on one thing. So I'm going step by step, layer by layer, do the pose, maybe put the clothes on him, okay, then put the hair, okay, then now focus on the face, like step by step, so your mind is not jumbled. You want to be cool, calm, and collected when you're putting all of this together. Now, if you're having trouble improving on very specific things like anatomy or digital painting or traditional painting, Copic markers and things like that, obviously I have videos that are tutorials on that, but I also will make videos on how to improve on those specific things, so it's okay. But this is a more general sense, more of a mindset you need to have, more of like the exercises, the base exercises you need to be taking throughout your whole experience as an artist in order to make sure you're growing at a faster level versus otherwise. Now, if you're having trouble improving on very specific things, don't worry. Obviously, I have videos and tutorials that go on how to learn some of these things and, you know, how to use some of these tools and all that kind of stuff. I will have videos that will focus on how to improve on specific things like, you know, anatomy, digital painting, traditional painting, and all that good stuff. But for this video, this is more of a general sense, a general idea of where your mindset needs to be and the exercises you need to apply in order to improve at a faster level versus otherwise. Think in layers. Know the rules before you attempt to break them. Make most of your mistakes during the early stages of your work, during the critical thinking phase of your work, whether it be during the thumbnailing phase. Like I said, with comics, they do all their thumbnailing, they know all the pages, they know how many pages, they know what character is going to be on it, where everything's going to go, how the panel is going to look, how many panels are on the page, how many pages are going to be. They do all of that there so that when they're doing the actual work, if they make a mistake in the actual work, it's an easy fix, right? Because most of the mistakes you're going to make are going to be during the thumbnailing. If you start drawing something and during the thumbnailing phase and you realize a big mistake that affects everything, it's much easier to fix a bunch of thumbnails than to fix like 30 pages that are already partially completed. Same goes for animation. They plan everything ahead. They know everything that happens, what characters say. Sometimes they have the script, but sometimes they have all the voice acting ready, all that good stuff. They plan ahead. They have your storyboarding for animation. It's a little different from comics, but they make sure everything is set. And sometimes maybe even give yourself certain milestones to hit, like a schedule. They also kind of make you more organized and, you know, make sure that you are improving or at least progressing in your goals. It's also a professional touch, and maybe it teaches you a couple things about deadlines and also tells you how fast you are in certain things. And, you know, with time, you will get faster at it. So when you see that, okay, maybe it's taking you less time to do the same thing, it's also a sign of growth. The model in question in this video is Sano, the main lead of my series Apple Black, and it's from the illustration on the cover of Volume 1 of Apple Black. And here I'm going to be repainting it because right now we have a Kickstarter going on, and I really appreciate if you guys check it out. You can get some really cool prizes on there. But the goal of the Kickstarter is to fund 3 books, and the goal is to help get those books into retail. This is basically an answer for those who have always wanted my books in bookstores, those who want translations to my books, as well as the other Saturday AM books in question, which are Hammer and Saigami. Now, obviously, Apple Black Volume 1 as well as Saigami Volume 1 have already been released, so the difference here is that we are creating a new experience for the person that's going to pick up the book in a bookstore, a completely new experience for retail. It's going to be better paper, better printing, a brand new cover as you're seeing me illustrate. So this new Sano is actually the cover of the new book, of this new edition of the Volume 1. It's going to be printed in color, so all the pages that were supposed to be in color will actually be in color as intended. There are going to be pages that weren't in color in the original that I'm going to color over, so I'm going to do new colored pages, a bunch of them in each chapter. And the book is also going to have a new chapter. No, it will not be filler. It's something that's going to add to the overall experience of Volume 1, and to me, from my perspective, make Volume 1 even better read. I think it'll be a stellar addition because when I did Volume 1, that was like, I started in 2013, so I believe I've grown a lot since then as an artist, as a storyteller, from all angles. And while I think Volume 1 was very good as is, there are still things that I could have improved on, and with this chapter I think is going to spread and shed light on certain things that make Volume 1 an overall better experience. And it's also going to be a remastering, so some things might be reworded to get my point across in a more effective way. And I'll also be fixing all the minor errors on my debut book. So I really hope you guys check out that Kickstarter, and you can get a lot of cool rewards, a voice acting gig, rare commissions from me, promotion on this channel, which is really cool too. I also want to thank you guys because we're almost at 200,000 subscribers on this channel. I really appreciate all the support. You can get exclusive content within the book, as well as one of the rewards, not one of the rewards, a bunch of the rewards are exclusive and rare. New Saturday AM issues that are only rare for our backers, and every backer is going to get issue 95 that's going to have the early pages of Apple Black Volume 3. Please help us get funded. Shout outs to those who have already backed us. We're over 50% funded, but we're running out of time, and I hope you guys go to the page and support us any way you can. And you can also help by sharing the page to whatever audience you have, however you can. 3, do research. Research on what you're trying to create. You know, don't just jump into certain things. Have a good idea of what you want to do, especially with illustrations. Sometimes you might want to learn certain basic things when it comes to putting an illustration together. Things like composition, you know, studying color theory, understanding that if all the colors that you have on that piece of work, if they're all saturated, you know, that means that the viewer's eyes are going to be battling and you're going to be fighting for a focus point. If you have like 6 colors on one illustration and they're all like bright red, bright yellow, bright green, bright everything, it's all super saturated, it's going to be hard to focus unless, you know, it's some artistic statement or something like that. Like, whatever you do, make sure you can like defend it. Make sure you have a purpose for making the decisions that you're making. Other than that, you know, having a good idea of how saturation, tints, color theory works, composition, how the characters are going to be placed and put together, and what kind of message does that say. If it's like a poster for your comic or novel, whatever it is, understanding the hierarchy of placement, hierarchy of size. Maybe the main character should be drawn at a bigger size versus all the other side characters, because that puts more focus on the characters, right? Or maybe a hierarchy of placement. If, like, say the main character or maybe the main villain is placed at the top of the illustration, that says something. You know, having a good understanding of what it means, making sure that all the decisions you make on that piece of work is defendable. You can defend it and it's on purpose. Your color choices, all that stuff. And I recommend doing research on all these things, research on the subject you're tackling, research on composition, studying color theory, understanding saturation, tints, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think it will overall help your idea of what it means to put artwork together. The research and the composition is just you having a list of all the ingredients you're going to need that you're going to put together to come up with this illustration, and knowing exactly what to do with the ingredients, knowing how much of each thing you're going to put. It's almost like cooking, right? Having a bunch of ingredients, knowing everything that you're going to need, why you need them, what their purpose is, being able to defend it, and, you know, applying yourself and creating the artwork and making sure that the composition is top notch. And you can do research on these key things, and I'll have videos focusing on these key things separately, but for this video, it's so big I can't focus on everything at once. 4, upgrade your tools. This helped me. You know, sometimes, to be honest, when it comes to tools, it is more about the user versus the tool. I've seen people create marvelous works of art with, you know, weird stuff, right? So it's more about the user versus the tool. But for very specific and very commercial work, like child entertainment, like animation, art, anime, manga, comic books, and things like that, I recommend that you experiment with a bunch of the tools, whether it be digital software or traditional tools to create work, or maybe it's mixed media, so it's a combination of both, or maybe you're combining both and maybe something extra that's very unique to you. But experimenting overall for you to then try to learn all of them. You don't necessarily have to be a master at everything, but try to learn all of them as best as you can and to kind of find your sweet spot. And then once you find that, you know, that can also help develop your style. So experiment with these tools, find out what other artists are using to create their piece of work, get those tools, invest in yourself, learn how to use those tools. There are lots of online resources and tutorials on YouTube, here on my channel, and even other channels. You can learn things, learn how to use them, see if you like them, and then, you know, move from there, maneuver your way from there. What type of pens do you use? Do you want to use Sakura micro inking pens? Do you want to use G pen? Or do you want to go completely digital when you're making your comic book? Get those art tool upgrades, because they make a change. You know, sometimes you learn something that you didn't, you know, otherwise know if you weren't trying to experiment and get your work out there, coming out of your comfort zone and trying to learn something new. You wouldn't know if maybe you prefer Sakura Microns to a G pen if you've never used a G pen before, or if maybe vice versa. If you've never used a G pen before, you wouldn't know you prefer it to Sakura Micron inking pens. You know, so experiment and find your sweet spot. If you're using a drawing tablet to make digital work, invest in like a graphic tablet and see what the improvements are. Trust me, there are going to be improvements. So invest in the tools that you're using. If you find your sweet spot and you know the tools you like, invest in the upgrades of those specific tools to make sure that, you know, your work improves. Again, it's more about the user than the tool. Doesn't mean that you have all the grade A tools means your artwork is going to automatically be grade A. That's not how it works. Find your sweet spot and upgrade the tools that are within that realm of your sweet spot. Again, make use of the art community and the internet overall to know what tools are out there, what artists are using, what kind of tools. Find a mentor to be able to get feedback from on how to use those tools, or just, even art. And the basic things I'm talking about here, when you create your work, have somebody credible, right, that you can bounce ideas off of, and someone who can critique your work. You have to be honest with yourself and be able to take critique in order to improve. As long as you guys have a clear understanding of where you're trying to go, then you have better critique, better informed critique, and you'll be able to improve from that. You have to be honest with yourself during this process. I have a folder, which is also kind of tying back into references. I have a folder on DeviantArt, I have a folder on Instagram, where I have all these artists and their great artwork I put in there. It's almost like an influence inspiration bank anytime I need some juices, and it's looking at all the creative work in there kind of puts ideas in my head. And sometimes I see some work and I always wonder, wait, how did this person create work like this? I want to create something like this, but not quite, but like I need to know how this person did this specific thing. And then I do the research on that specific thing and learn, okay, what tools they use. I try to get those tools and then try to learn those tools separately. Everything is different. You apply yourself and you learn everything that you need to in order to create the artwork you have in mind. And if it leads you to getting a new tool that you've never used before, invest yourself and take on the challenge. Challenge yourself and make sure that you're finishing the work that you're putting out there. You want to make sure that when you're putting work out there, unless like it's a sketch, it can be, you're experimenting with something. It doesn't necessarily need to be complete. That's one thing. But if you're working on an illustration, you want to make sure you have a body of work with complete work. It helps your experience overall. It gives you that sense of completion, and it helps push you forward to grow as an artist. We've kind of touched this with, the other tips as well, but I feel like this deserves its own section altogether. Put out finished work and be consistent as well. Use references like we've said. Focus on your weaknesses. Try new techniques. Keep developing your style, and you'll get used to it, and you'll make sure that you're progressing. When you see the work that you did before versus what you're doing right now, you want to make sure that you are creating better work than what you did before. But you want to make sure that you are finishing. Don't shy away from your weaknesses. Again, challenge yourself. If you have trouble drawing hands, don't always draw your characters with your hands in your pocket. If you have trouble drawing feet, don't always draw your characters halfway. If you know that's a problem, focus on it and try to tackle it, and make sure that you almost enjoy the fact that you can do it now. You almost enjoy the fact that you're learning it, and you're not afraid of drawing that kind of thing again, whether it be backgrounds, hands, feet. I know a lot of people have issues with those things, and much more. But learn those things. If you don't know how to draw like water in your style, try to develop that. Look at other styles, right? And see what you like about each, and see, give and take here and there. Draw what you would have drawn without the reference. Look at the reference and see how you can apply it to what you already have to make it feel and look more like water. In your comic, are you drawing only headshots and all the headshots are coming from this same angle? Or do you understand the idea of the 180 rule? These are things, again, this goes back into research. Again, when you do research, you understand what the 180 rule is. Challenge yourself with the 180 rule and make sure you know the rule before you can break it. And so when you break it, you're breaking it with a purpose. Maybe if somebody asks why you broke it, you can defend that. Challenge yourself with more dynamic angles. If all the angles and camera angles in your comic or animation, whatever, are simple and basic, and you really don't have any reason for choosing those angles except for it's easy for you, then, that's a problem. Understand why, those dynamic angles are chosen, or certain camera angles are chosen. Understand why, they, enhance the storytelling aspect of whatever you're putting together, and apply yourself. Challenge yourself versus just sticking in your comfort zone. The comfort zone is okay. There's no problem there. But once in a while, in order to grow, you may need to step out. Learn to correct yourself, right? Again, this goes back to some of the other tips, but when you see your work and you're improving, in order to improve, you need to be able to spot and train your eye to be able to spot errors and fix them, correct them. Don't just leave them there, especially if you're still during the period that you're creating the work. You want to make sure that you're correcting yourself and you're not like continuing to make the same mistakes. Look at it, get feedback if you need to, right? But make sure you're getting feedback from a credible source. train your eye to be able to find these errors. Once you find them, fix them. The eraser is your friend. Again, you want to make most of these mistakes during the thumbnailing concept phase, right? But it's okay to make mistakes later on. Just make sure that you know them and you are learning from them. Don't take too many long breaks, because sometimes you might forget stuff, and you might forget things that, you know, some of your bad habits that might be mistakes, and when you draw or paint or stuff like that, you don't want to take long breaks. Again, it goes back to one of the other tips where I said be consistent and consistently be putting work out there, because the more work you put into it, the more you put into it overall, you know, the better you get out of it. So don't draw and then spend like 3 years doing anything else except drawing, and then come back and try to draw and think you'd be the same. In some cases, you might regress. Think of it like working out. If you work out and you're doing pretty well, and all of a sudden you don't work out and you eat whatever you want to eat for like 2 years, you're not going to come back and be the same. So that's an error in itself that you want to correct if that's a mistake you already made. 8, compare your work. You know, some people say, no, don't compare your work to other artists. I compare my work to other artists all the time, and I think I've grown for it. The part where it gets destructive is when you compare your work to other artists and you kind of go get down on yourself every time and almost makes you want to quit. No, the goal is to compare yourself to other artists, see what they're doing, how you can apply to your work to make it feel better or make it look better, or just make sure you get the whole point of your work across as best as you want to get it across, right? I'm looking at other artists' work and studying it and trying to improve myself. And sometimes it might even be less about the work and more about the presentation and look and feel of something that is deemed professional by the industry standard or just today's standard overall, and looking at my work and figuring out, okay, why doesn't my work look like that? And that has helped me tremendously, especially if you're comparing yourself to the best, at least to the works that you admire. The goal is not to get there overnight, but the goal is to compare yourself to that, learn from them, and then get better than yourself yesterday. The goal is to be better than yourself yesterday, not necessarily to be better than what you are comparing your work to. For instance, my comic, before I put it out, I try to make sure, okay, these pages that I'm putting together, you know, I know I'm gonna get better, but like, is it comparable in any way to the grade A works in the industry? And once my answer was yes, after, you know, showing it to the public and getting majority positive feedback, and make sure that you're also getting feedback from credible sources, especially people who are in the industry you're trying to get into, that's a good sign. So that's what I mean by comparing your work, at least one aspect of it. Again, it's kind of like knowing the rules before you can break them. You kind of need to see what everybody is doing before you can actually do something that's different. You need to know what's out there in order for you to deem yourself different from what's out there. You can't claim to be different if you don't know what's out there. This is also part of research. So don't let comparing eat at you. Goal is to be better than you yesterday. 9, always want to improve. There is so much to learn out there. There's so many avenues that you can explore in order to ensure that you grow. And always keep in the back of your mind that there is always going to be room to improve. There is no peak. Once you feel like you hit a peak, that's a problem you probably want to correct. Even my work, I look at it and I see that there's several parts of the work that I need to improve on, and I always make sure and strive to correct myself in those areas. Never stopping to want to improve. And 10, lastly, be patient. Everybody's different, some faster than others. These tips are to help you develop faster than usual. They're not to make you know how to draw tomorrow. You know what I mean? So be patient and make sure you apply all this stuff. And if it doesn't come to you ASAP, don't be discouraged, to keep on working hard. So that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the illustration that I've put together in this video. Don't forget to check out the Kickstarter and please help us reach our goal. Some of the stretch goals are pretty rad as well. Detroit, smash that like button. United States has smashed that subscribe button and hit that bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and all that good stuff. Check out Saturday AM. Everything, again, that Kickstarter is pretty crucial. So yeah, that's it. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm out.